My subscribers are always asking me for tutorials that don't involve paper bead jewelry, but other things that you can make with paper beads. Not that there's anything wrong with jewelry, it's just fun to do something else once in a while. So today I've got a new non-jewelry paper bead tutorial for you. But before we start, make sure you've hit that subscribe button so you can get all of the new paper bead tutorials when they come out. I'm going to show you just one way that you can use the new Christmas tree ornament form to create a paper bead Christmas tree ornament. You'll use this to create a wireframe, wrapping the wire around, and it has cross pieces which are going to allow us to use paper beads to look a little bit like tree branches. Let's get started.
Here are the supplies you'll need to make this project. You'll need 2 gauges of wire. I'm using aluminum wire at gauge 16 for the frame and gauge 12 to string the beads. The Christmas tree ornament form and a paper bead roller to make your beads. You can get both of these at paperbeadrollers.com. I'll put a link in the description for you. You'll need paper strips to make cone-shaped beads. Now I printed these strips using my Christmas ornament printable paper strips file that you can purchase at paperbeadrollers.com. It has 5 Christmas ornament themed patterns. I printed this with my inkjet printer on 65-pound white cardstock. Now I also did a version of this tree where I used plain green 65-pound cardstock and then decorated the tree with micro beads as ornaments. You have a ton of options. If you want to do the star at the top like I have on my sample projects, you'll need some smaller strips in a good star color like a yellow. The exact dimensions don't matter, it just depends on how large you want your star to be. I'll talk more about the measurements when we get to that part of the tutorial. There are some projects where you can get away without glazing your paper beads, but in this case, you want your ornament to last for years, so protecting them is smart. I'll use triple thick from Deco Arts and a flat brush for mine. First, we'll roll the beads. You can make a cone shape with any triangle-shaped strip, but I'll tell you a secret. You get a much nicer cone shape if one corner of your strip is a 90-degree angle. Do you see how as I roll, I keep the top edge of the strip aligned and the cone just kind of makes itself? I don't have to fight with it. It's because of that 90-degree angle. In order to fit the wireframe, the top edge of your strip should be about 1.5 inches wide. The length of the strip isn't as important, and it's going to vary depending on how thick your paper is and how fat you want your beads to be. You may need to experiment a little bit. Glue down the tip when you get to the end, and you're ready to glaze. Now, as I said earlier, I'm using triple thick on these, just one coat. And I have one warning for you. When I was putting my beads on the skewers so I could glaze them, I made a huge mistake. Be careful when moving them around on the skewers before you glaze because the paper layers will slip and it will change the length of the bead. When I did the green tree, I ended up with beads that were different lengths, so I had to be really careful at the order I strung them on the tree to make them all fit and look nice. Make sure you glaze the edges of the bead because they'll need to stand up to the wire we're using to attach them to the frame. Now it's time to make the wireframe. Cut approximately 2 feet of your 16 gauge wire to make the frame. If you want a longer hook, add a few inches to that. Now it helps to straighten the wire before you begin. You can do it with pliers, but I got this helpful wire straightening tool and it works wonders. Now that your wire is straight, we can bend it. We'll start at the top left of the tree. Place the wire on the ledge of the form. You just go down and bend it around that first corner, over, bend it down again, over and down again, and then go across the bottom of the form. Now you do it backwards. You take the wire up and over. Up and over again. Up. And then you're up at the top of the tree. And there's your frame. Now I'm going to use my pliers to make my corners just a little tighter, but if you're making the style of tree I'm doing in this project, the frame will be hidden, so it doesn't really matter how straight your lines or how sharp your curves are. That's why this is an excellent project for people like me who are not experienced wire wrappers. Okay, we're ready for the next step. Now, before we start attaching the beads to the frame, I have an important disclaimer. I am not an experienced wire wrapper. The way that I did this is not elegant, but after trying several methods, I found this method created the sturdiest end result. The back, it's a little messy. But my vision for the style of this ornament is that the beads represent tree branches. They may not be exactly even at the bottoms here or evenly spaced in between, just like real tree branches. So in one of my first tries with this project, I tried wrapping the wire in between each bead neat and pretty, as awesome wire wrappers do, but it caused there to be too much spacing between the branches and it was difficult to work with. So I'm going to show you a method that is not really elegant, but it does the job. I also want to say that you can try unlimited designs with this frame. For example, you could do zigzag beads with this beautiful wire wrapping in between. You could put round beads all over the frames and then fill in the middles with barrel beads. Like, there are so many ways you can get creative with this ornament frame. I'm really excited to see what you come up with, and I hope you'll head over to Paper Bead Fanatics group on Facebook and show me what you do. So to start, we're going to wrap the 12 gauge wire to the corner of the frame. Now I prefer to use one long piece of wire that's about 6 feet long that will get me through the whole project, but it is a little difficult to manage at first. So if you want to use multiple shorter pieces and tie them off, that would be fine. So I'm going to string on the first bead, the wide end first. Now, if you don't have coated pliers and you aren't going to do a ton of wire work, there is no need to go and buy them. This wire won't be seen when we're done, so you could use regular jewelry pliers or just even your fingers to close up the end. Line up the first bead on top of the frame wire. We want to hide the frame. To secure it, you'll weave your 12 gauge wire between your 16 gauge wires. Now that's one benefit to leaving the top open at the end. I can just pass the wire right through. When I do the next bead, you'll see it better in the video. So string on the second bead. Line it up so the bottom of the bead is over the wire frame. The top of this bead will be covered by the second layer of beads, so you're really more worried about where the bottom of the bead hits because that's the part that will be seen. Okay, see how I can just kind of slide this wire behind the top frame piece and then pull it down into position for my next bead. You don't have to thread it through, which can be difficult with this long of a wire. Okay, we'll do one more. String the bead, line it up, pull the extra wire down behind that front frame and just pull down to secure it in place. All right, go ahead and finish this layer and I'll meet you back here to show you how to secure the last bead. When you get to the last bead on the bottom, you have a little extra to do to secure it in place. See how it kind of moves and sticks out? So we're going to thread your wire back up through the end of the bead a second time and pull it tight. Then thread the wire through any of these gaps between the existing wire and pull tight to secure it. That sets you up to string the first bead of layer 2. So string on the bead and we're going to just repeat what we did for layer 1. A little note on spacing. So for my second bead, I'm going through the first gap right here so that I can lay this bead down right next to the frame bead. But after this, I'm going to be skipping and going through every other gap because it's going to space out my second layer a little bit better. So keep going and I'll meet you back here at the end of this layer. Now you're going to secure the last bead on layer 2 just like we did in the first row. Go back up through the end bead, string your wire through the back and pull tight to secure it. Make sure that where your wire ends up positions you to put on the first bead of the top layer. For me, I'll be using 5 beads here at this top layer because that's what fits. Again, it's going to depend on how fat your beads are that you made. Now, before you begin stringing the beads, find the point where you want the frame to come together at the top. I'm going to put a little bend in the wire at that point so the 2 top pieces are side by side. This is what's going to turn into your hook. So you want them to come together nice and neatly. Don't secure them yet though. We're going to do that after we get the beads on. So string your first bead and you're going to position it on top of the wire frame just like we've done. Then wrap the 12 gauge wire around that place where the frame meets, where you put the little bends in. Go down and around the back, and then we're going to put the second bead on. Now you're going to string each bead like this, wrapping around the top of the frame. It's not going to be pretty, but that's okay because this part is going to be hidden from view. It doesn't need to be perfectly neat. The star at the top of the tree is going to go over it. You can also wrap over it if you decide not to do a star. Okay, now that that top layer is finished, I'm going to do the first neat wire wrapping in this project, and I'm going to wire wrap the frame all the way up to the end. So this is going to be visible. This is the piece that makes your ornament hook. So take your time and wrap it neatly. You can use your pliers to kind of squeeze the rows of wrapping together if you need to. When you have about an inch or so left, go ahead and tuck the wire down into the center to secure it. Now I'm going to even out these ends and cut them down, and I'm going to make a decorative hook. So I'm just going to curve out both ends just to finish it off and look nice. So when you're happy with how it looks, you can use your bead roller to bend the hook around into a curve. As you do this, your frame might bend, but it's okay because you can just bend it back into shape. And it's time to make the star. So you'll need 5 to 8 tiny little cone beads, just depends how many you want to use. You'll need the same amount of tiny spacer beads and some more 12 gauge wire. Now all I do here is string the cone bead on wide end down and put the spacer down next. Now the spacer acts as a stopper which will hold the cone bead in place. So run your wire around the outside of the spacer and back down into the cone bead and pull it tight. The key to having a star that looks good is pulling these all very tightly, so there's not a lot of extra wire in this. So you're going to do this 4 more times, and that gives you your 5 points of your star. So kind of push them into a star configuration and just wrap your wire around the center to hold it in place. I'm going to put 1 more bead in the middle here to kind of round it out and cover up the wire. You can see in one of the other test trees that I did, I actually put 3 beads in the middle. So be creative. You can do this however you think looks nice. So I'm going to pull the wire up through the middle, string on that last bead in its spacer, and then run the wire back down through the cone bead. So I'm going to use this extra wire to actually attach the star to my tree. I'm going to use this little piece that's left over from the beginning of the star and stick it through. Put the larger piece through, just thread it right through that existing wire, and then twist them like a bread tie and just make sure it's secured. And cut it off and hide the wires in the back. If you feel like your star is not secure enough to hold up over the years of being on the tree, you can always secure it with a little bit of hot glue. Now, if the back of the ornament really bothers you because it is kind of messy, or you're giving these as gifts and you want it to look a little neater, you may want to cut a piece of paper or a piece of felt and hot glue it on the back of this ornament, and it can just cover that up. You can also, if you are an experienced wire wrapper, I'm sure you have various tricks you may be able to use to hide some of those wires. And there you have it, a paper bead Christmas tree ornament. Now, if you want to put snow on the tree like I did with my green tree, I use this snow text from Deco Art. It's just kind of a thick, slushy type of texture, and you can use like a clay knife or a spoon even to just spoon it out of the jar and put it onto your tree and push it around and let it dry in place. And there you have it, a paper bead Christmas tree ornament. Now I'll put a link to the supplies for this project in the video description. Please subscribe to the channel for more paper bead projects, and I'll see you on Facebook in the Paper Bead Fanatics group. Happy rolling!